Shilpam by Sabreesan Sir of IT Department. Sabreesan Sir. Can you all hear me? Thank you, Sabreesan Sir. Good afternoon to one and all present here. A hearty welcome for our chief guest, Mr. Radhakrishna Kavaluru, our principal, staff members, and our precious students. Myself, Dr. Aishwarya, EDC in charge, and my students coordinators are Kritika, Gayatri, Santosh, and Hari Bhaskar. This event is about the entrepreneurship development. It is the means of enhancing the knowledge and the skill. And the main point of the development process is to strengthen and increase the numbers that would be the best way to create and make aware of the entrepreneurship among the students. This entrepreneurship development process helps the new firms or ventures get better in achieving their goals, improve the business and the nation's economy. Another essential factor of this process is to improve the capacity to manage and develop and build a process enterprise, keeping in mind the risks related to it. Thank you. Before starting the program, I would like to call upon our beloved principal to address the welcome speech. Principal Sir, I warmly welcome you to the EDC cell. I would like to call upon our principal to address the welcome speech.
Hello. Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you, sir.
Yeah, very good afternoon. One second, please. Yeah, very good afternoon, and the most distinguished resource person, Mr. Radhakrishna Kavaluru, scientist, project manager, ISRO, my dear faculty members and organizers, and my dear students who are interested in entrepreneurship. Very good afternoon, and I'm really glad to be a part of this webinar on entrepreneurship opportunities in space applications. So, we all know that the rise of entrepreneurship is more in the previous years, and but not up to the expectation actually. Right? Only 5% of the graduates are choosing the entrepreneurship domain for their future career. If you look at the current challenges of India, especially in the sector of this youth bulge, like there is going to be 70%, near about 70% of the youth bulge in the country actually, right? So which means like which means that until 2050, if you look at it, there will be about 70% of the population which will be in the age of 25 to 30 actually, right? So in that range, until those years, we have a youth bulge in the country, which means like there is going to be a more youth in the country, which means like India is going to be a very young India actually, right? In terms of comparison with other developed countries and developing countries. When other countries are aging, India is becoming youth actually, and that status will remain same until 2050. So this is one of our important asset for us actually. Having more youth population in the country is one of the very important asset for the country. When we harness this particular youth potential and convert that as to an GDP kind of thing for the growth of the India, right, I'm sure we'll reach heights and will become superpower. So in this scenario, like, see, even though when I say like, okay, there are 70% of the youth, whether the country is ready for that in terms of providing jobs or in terms of making them entrepreneurs is really, really a question. Like, if you look at it, in the current scenario, there is only 24% of Indian students are pursuing higher education actually, right? Which means the gross enrollment ratio is only 24% as of now. The country is also, through its national education policy, is thinking of improving the gross enrollment ratio to the 50, actually, to 50%. So when this change is happening, there is going to be more number of universities, or there is no going to be more number of students enrolling for the higher education. So, and looking at the youth population and the gross enrollment ratio target of 50%, there is going to be a much youth who will take up the education sector. And after this education, what happens is really, really important. So the number of youth which is going out, who are going to come out from education, completing education, is going to be more. So country has to provide either jobs to them, or they should be created as they should be developed as a job provider kind of thing, right? So in that scenario, if you ask only government to provide job, they have to create at least 1 million jobs per month, which is quite impractical actually. Right? So it's our essential opportunities, or it is our essential responsibility to motivate as a higher education provider, to motivate students who are interested in entrepreneurship, and we need to nurture them, and we need to provide space and facilities, have schemes, methods to support the entrepreneurship ideas that they have. So the college, our college itself has the Idea Lab, which is going to be established with the help of AICTE. And we also have a product development lab, and we are happy that many students have developed products, especially this Agni's Vayu, and then the Agni's the herbal cream. So if you look at all these things, there are students who are quite doing interestingly, solving the problems which are available as a real-time problems in many industries. So I'm very glad that the idea that comes out to solve a problem has to be incubated well, or promoted well, or to be supported well, so that it converts to a product actually, right? So we as an institution is supporting that process, and I'm sure many students have shown interest in this thing. And so it is our important responsibility that we promote entrepreneurship in the higher education system. So I wish many of the students also to take the entrepreneurial journey, and there are very quite good number of startups very recently raised in the country. Actually, if you look at the previous year, there were about 50,000 startups actually that has originated. And it is also good to see the markets. The Indian market is also are supporting the startups actually. If you look at the recent Zomato or any other fintech company IPOs, there were the market shares were really, really high. So which means there is a welcoming sign for all the startups actually by the market. So there is a good opportunity in front of us, and government has also initiated so many entrepreneurship opportunity schemes to support entrepreneurships and startups. So I would like to say the students that please think about ideas in terms of providing solutions to the challenges that the industry faces, are providing solutions and making affordable are the cost, in the cost factor. Either work on the affordability or on the efficiency part, are also trying to solve the industry challenges kind of thing. So please work on these areas, and I'm sure we will also support from our side. And my sincere wishes to all of you who are attending today. I hope we have a great resource person today. He will also be addressing the opportunities, entrepreneurship opportunities in space. So please take notes and then find out, have a brainstorming afterwards and look at what best can you do, right? So with these notes, with this short speech, I end my speech, and then my sincere wishes to all of you and thanks to the resource person. Thank you. Dr. Aishwarya?
Now session is started to that Mr. Radha Krishna. The session will hand over to sir. Please proceed forward. Radha Krishna sir.
Yeah, I think this was Mr. Radhakrishna sir, are you audible? Are we audible? Your audio is not, we are not getting your audio actually. You have to unmute and speak. The status shows you are muted.
And now I am audible, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So it was muted from your side. Okay.
Okay.
So shall we start?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay, let me share my screen and once you can confirm. So you are able to see the presentation?
Yes, we could see.
Okay. So hi everyone. Hi Agni College. Thanks for inviting me for this entrepreneurship in space talk. I sincerely thank Srinivasan sir and also Aishwarya ma'am for inviting me. So I am Radhakrishna, and as told by Sir, I am a project manager for NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar, and I work with National Remote Sensing Center at ISRO. Okay, and today I will be talking to you all about entrepreneurship opportunities in space and what, as budding young students of India, you can contribute to space activities. Okay, so just to give a brief introduction, I am an undergrad from Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology. I work at ISRO as scientist SG and also a project manager. And I basically work on Earth observation and image processing. So my work, daily work looks like I deal with a lot of satellite imagery to derive insights out of it and give it to customers like a lot of ministries and grassroots level administrators like IAS officers and also a lot of private companies. So in this routine, I get to interact with many startups and also big companies that are using satellite imagery and also high-tech space technology, in their applications. And today I will shed a light on what commercial activities can be done in space, because this is a topic that is quite unexplored till today, and a lot of people have that inheritance that okay, I don't want to get into space because it will take a lot of effort and money and all of that. So I'll shed some light on that topic as well. And if you want to follow me, you can follow me on LinkedIn. So this talk or webinar will be mainly focusing on these four categories, right? So in the initial phase, we'll talk about space market and how the fundamentals of space and activities looks like, and then we'll delve into quantitative analysis and how the market is behaving and what is the predictions, and then we'll talk about some of the existing players, what are the problems they are trying to solve, and then finally we'll talk about, especially focusing on narrow Indian scenario, what is Indian government doing for encouraging startups and other companies in doing space activities, right? So that's going to be it. And this is a famous quote by Krista McAuliffe. She was a teacher, and she was an astronaut as well. So she wanted to teach in space, but she in the Challenger disaster she was killed. So this was a quote by her. So space is for everybody. It's not just for a few people in science or math, right? And that's a new frontier out there, and it is everybody's business to know about space, because once you go out and look into the sky, a lot of things happen before you, and if you don't know about that, your ancestors knew about that, and that's how they used to sail in waters and all. And if you don't know the basics of what is happening around you, then that is like a very layman's picture of you not understanding what is happening around you. So it is fundamental, as in to understand everything that is happening in space, and to understand where your country is going with the science and technology. So being from telling that, I want to enter into space market and the history and the applications and the environment. So this topic will cover the whole history, what is happening in the space domain, what are the different aspects of space, and also the environment, right? So when we talk about space market, there are two major categories, right? One is Earth observation and one is space observation. So understanding this is also quite important, because there are multiple number of applications inside these two categories as well. So inside Earth observation. So what is Earth observation? When you send satellites or sensors into space, and then you try to look at the Earth itself, right? Like the Google Maps that you see daily, right? So how are those images captured? They are captured from a satellite which is looking at Earth, right? And also the other weather satellites and communication and GPS that you use in your phone. All of these are satellites that are trying to solve problems on Earth, right? And then there is another category which is space observation. So there are sensors and radars, telescopes and cameras that are on Earth and also in space, but are not looking at Earth, but elsewhere, right? So that is basically space observation, right? And there are multiple applications there as well. Like you want to look at the universe, you want to look at the planets, you want to look at the sun, understand the slow solar flares, understand the space environment, right? So both of these are two major market classifications, and our mostly related to civilian applications. If you want to understand, mostly it will be related to Earth observation, right? And the space observation is related to science and research and what is happening in the universe, that sort of a thing. So starting, right, so just understand where the space mindset came from, right? So even before the invention of telescope, also a lot of events like comets, right, and asteroids were seen in space. And even the timings also, right? Mayan calendar was there, Hindu calendar was there, right? Panchang itself is a a depiction of what our ancestors used to do when seeing space, right? So even that is a indication that space has been commercial from ages, right? And coming to telescopes, right? So the first use of space as an application started when people started to go from one place to another, right? Sailors wanted to see stars, where their position is, and thereby understand their location on Earth, right? So thereby they wanted to also see the basically the ground telescope was invented for the ground application. So they wanted to see distance, people, and activities that are happening basically in the defense sector. So from a fort, if a soldier wants to understand what is happening, let's say 2 kilometers away, or on the hill that is before the fort, what they used to do is they used to use a ground telescope, right? And the same thing, as time went by, the glassmaker Hans Lippershey, he tried to convert the major focal length of the eyepiece to a minor one, and thereby he tried to aim it at stars, and he could see a very good magnification of the stars and planets also he could able to resolve. And thereby a telescope has the use of telescope has started, and then Galileo popularized it, saw the Saturn's rings, Jupiter moons, and also proved heliocentricity, and thereby the adoption of telescope as an instrument started. So telescope as a business also evolved very rapidly during that revolution, industrial revolution, and also intellectual revolution in Europe. And then that itself has provided a very good valuable resource to all the astronomers and science interested people in science to it has a starting step. So it has become a basic environment like calipers, right? So that itself was a very good business in the 16th, 17th, and even these days also. So one basic 8-inch focal telescope starts with around 13,000, right? So if someone is manufacturing that at like 3,000 to 4,000 rupees, there's a very good profit margin. And even in those days, it was totally a profit margin because the glass makers used to get it very cheaply, and they used to put it in a cardboard tube, and they used to glue it, hot glue it, and then you used to sell, right? So even with that basic fundamental assembly, they used to see Saturn's rings and Jupiter moons as well. So the Galilean telescope is a refracting telescope. They used to see in that detail with a very cheap telescope. So that started people looking into space, and then rockets have come. Rockets, everyone knows that rockets were used as a weapons, not the basic ones which have like arrows, right? They are basic projectiles. But when the gunpowder was invented in China, it spread very rapidly, first to India and then to Korea and then to Europe as well. So people used to put that gunpowder inside the rockets, and then they used to use it as a projectile. The basic weapon was called as ballista. So they used to use it as a projectile, and used basically this started in the defense sector, right? And then projectile weapons and transport was invented. So in the background, what you're able to see over here is a picture which the first human transport using a rocket. So it was like a Diwali rocket, but it is a bigger size, and they stuffed a lot of gunpowder into it, and a man was tied to it, right? And then they transported that man and the gunpowder from this place to the other island. This is basically Italy. So the war was happening those days. They wanted to transport this gunpowder to the other island, crossing the ocean, because there was a lot of enemy ships in the ocean, and they did that. So this was a painting of that. So this is also a very commercial activity, because rockets as such are primarily used in defense, right? And once they advance their technology, obviously there will be a lot of space applications, right? So this is a very profitable entity, rockets. So as the technology progressed, right, the rockets advanced, it became missiles, right? Missiles were used in World War II as well. And then came invention of ballistic missiles and anti-ballistic missiles. The picture you are able to see is a ballistic missile, which you can also call it as a intercontinental missile. So as I told, the basic weapon in the history was ballista. So it was a very big bow where the gunpowder was stuffed into the arrow, and it was shooted onto enemies. It's almost like a mortar round, right? And these ballistic missiles, what they do right now is they travel into space, and then they blast in the space. So you're able to see point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. From 1 to 5, it's almost like a rocket. So it gets out of the Earth's gravity, and then they blast over there, and then the small projectiles land wherever they are programmed to, right? So these are ballistic missiles. And anti-ballistic missiles also work in the same way. They are launched, and in the space they blast in, so that they can attack all the small projectiles in the stage of 7 and 8, right? So this is also one form of a rocket. Only change is that instead of launching a big satellite or small satellites into orbit around Earth, they are launching small projectiles which fall on certain programmed places on Earth, right? And this is also a very fruitful and a profitable entity, because a lot of companies right now, in not in India but in Western world and also in Russia, they are private companies are manufacturing these missiles and rockets and are selling to other companies, like even in Israeli aerospace industries and all, right? So this is one form of profit that you can make from a basic technology that can be used in space, right? And then coming to first satellite, right? So we have talked about the history, we talked about how the space was used for different applications, and how missiles are used, right? Then coming into satellites. So satellites were not invented till that Cold War was started, right? So there was a space race between USSR and USA. Till that time, there were missiles, there were rockets and warheads and all. But a satellite is a revolutionary technology back then, which was launched by USSR initially. So this Sputnik 1, what it did was it broadcasted small radio pulses. That's it. So the four antennas that you're able to see just worked as the FM radio that you're able to see, but from space. So what this led USSR was USSR proved that satellites are possible, and then it broadcasted radio pulses, right? So the transmission of radio pulses from the atmosphere of Earth, from the outside to atmosphere and to Earth, gave them a lot of factors about what atmosphere of Earth looks like from outside, right? So they knew about atmosphere drag and also about ionosphere, which eventually led to invention of radio signals from space to Earth and communication satellites and all of that. So this particular satellite sparked the space race, because USA was not able to do it before Russia. USA wanted to send man to moon, and rest is history, right? So as I talked about Sputnik 1, it was somewhere in 1950s, and this is 2022. So Satellites have evolved a lot in the 70 years, and there are all types of satellites. The primary satellites that people launch these days, the private companies and the government players, are Earth observation. Because whenever someone is investing a lot of money in a space program, they want to be able to justify that money, right? So they always, whenever we talk about entrepreneurship, the first thing that we talk about is return of investment, right? So if I'm putting 200 crores in a satellite program, what is the return of investment I'm getting? So there are this class of satellites called Earth observation satellites, which are taking images of Earth in various spectra of light. So as you know, light is consisting of various spectra: visible, ultraviolet, infrared, all of that. In a certain spectra of light, you can use that image in a certain application. Like for example, if you're taking near infrared, you can use that particular band of light to tell whether a plant is healthy or not, right? That is near infrared. And then there is also crossing near infrared, the near infrared crossband, which will tell you the age of the plant as well, from when the plant has been planted to right now. What is the age of the plant? Is there, the plant is infected by any pesticide or not? So that sort of sensors are being used inside satellites to help farmers, understand what their farm is doing. Is there any action that they have to take to, correct the farms, and what farms they can plant. So you do a simple time series analysis of that area and surrounding areas to understand which farm can be better served to that soil, just by taking one image, right? So this is one sort of application. There are n number of applications, not just agriculture. I talked about agriculture, but there are other applications as well. We'll talk about that. So that is Earth observation. Communication satellites are satellites which are like staying at geostationary orbits, that are always talking to Earth in some sort of mechanism, right? So that is communication satellites. For example, you might be seeing in news that Air Force or Indian Army has launched one satellite with ISRO that are helping in army communications. How is it possible? Basically, they will launch the satellite in a geostationary orbit, and geostationary orbit, you might have learnt in your 10th or ninth classes, which is like the satellite is stationary with respect to Earth's rotation. And whenever you want to talk to that satellite, it's always at that position only, like your dish TV antennas, right? They are fixed in one position, and that means their point is talking to a satellite which is always fixed in that position. So Earth is rotating and that satellite is also rotating with same speed, right? So that's how communication is possible. So all the army trucks or planes can send their data, because the antennas are not available because they're in some external location. They can send the data to satellite, and satellite will relay it back to Earth, right? So wherever their headquarters is. So that is the class of communication satellites. Navigation satellites, you already know, there is GPS. It will provide you the time from which you can construct your location on Earth. Weather satellites, so these satellites are also mostly geostationary satellites which look at Earth in different bands, and they try to predict the cloud movements and the ocean winds and all of that, whereby you can calculate whether how the weather will be looking like in any point in place. Space telescopes are also another interesting class of satellites. So the telescopes over Earth, right? So even though they are big, they are having a very big barrier of atmosphere, and atmosphere is very wobbly, and it's also distorting whatever the light is coming from space, right? So why do stars twinkle? Because of atmosphere. So if the atmosphere did not distort the light, the stars would not twinkle, and when you saw from the telescope, you would see a constant beam of light. So because the atmosphere is there, there are big telescopes that are launched into space so that the atmosphere is bypassed. And these are the class of satellites like Hubble Space Telescope, Chandra X-ray Telescope, and ISRO say we have Astrosat and all of that, right? So that's one sort of satellite. The other sort of satellites are space stations, which are man lab for conducting experiments and also other procedures in space. Even ISS is used to launch small satellites as well, right? So these are the class of satellites. And when I was speaking about all of these different applications, there will be thousands of business opportunities in all of these satellites, right? Even the private companies right now are launching the entire satellites itself, like Earth observation satellites, communication satellites, and we'll talk about all of that in the coming slide. Now, we stop about talking stop talking about satellites, and we talk about launch vehicles, which is another different class of business opportunities. So the first launch was an R7 ICBM. So you saw Sputnik was launched not from a straight rocket, but was launched from a ICBM, which is an intercontinental ballistic missile. So on the right side on the stamp, you were able to see that R7 Semyorka, which is an ICBM, of that Cold War era age, which was also possible to launch nuclear warheads with it. But Sputnik was launched from this satellite, this rocket, and this is basically an ICBM. So there's not a lot of difference between missiles and rockets, right? There is different stages, and this whole payload has to be transported to space, right? And what the payload does in space is its own business, right? If it wants to look at the earth or space or fall onto earth somewhere, it's the payloads work. But the launch vehicle works in a similar way. So if someone is working on building a launch vehicle, they have already worked on building a missile, or vice versa, right? So this is a first launch, and all of these space applications or sciences are byproducts of defense applications. So when we work on some defense application, we get a lot of byproducts, and also when we work on a space application, we get a lot of byproducts, right? So there are different launch vehicle types right now that are existing. There are small lift, medium lift, heavy lift, and super heavy lift, right? So at in ISRO we have small lift and medium lift, which are like less than 2,000 kg payload handling, and there are 2,000 to 20,000 kg payload handling. And then there are heavy lift and super heavy lift with the Western agencies and also private companies, which launch entire space stations and cars and a lot of different things into space. You must have seen SpaceX car launch, right? So I'm just showing you the super heavy lift and heavy lift launch vehicles. You're able to see Ariane 5, which is a private company's launch vehicle. Starship is a private company's launch vehicle. Ariane 5, Falcon 9, Energize, Falcon Heavy, a Long March 9 is a Chinese launch vehicle. And we have last May, we have Starship Super Heavy, which is also a private company's launch vehicle. So totally on this chart itself, we are able to see 7 private companies launch vehicles. And it does not matter how much amount of money you have. It always matters that what is the technology and the plans that you've got for building any amount of technology. Because once you've got good amount of plans and the technology backing the tests for it, right, there is a lot of mechanism in the country and the ecosystem around you to support you forward, because there are business use cases which are having payloads of more than 50,000 kgs that wants to get launched into space. And in India, we do not have that class of launch vehicles, right? So this clearly is a business opportunity, right? Although even in India, there are startups that are working on small lift and also medium lift, because right now the only launch vehicle that India has is with ISRO, right? The PSLVs, and we are building also the SSLVs. But if the private sector comes into play, right, there's a lot of opportunities in India to use that private entities for going forward. Because when ISRO puts all its money into launch vehicles, there's a lot of stuff that it has to take care of. It has to take care of human resources, the research and the maintenance and all of that. But when private companies come into play, there's a lot of cost cutting that private entities can do. And that is why government has always been supporting people to come into and act in space activities. So as I told you, there are different amount of applications also. So till now we talked about satellite launching, activities, different types of satellites, and also launch vehicles. Now let's talk about applications. So one set of satellites are Earth observation satellites, right? And there are different types of applications that you can derive out of those images. So already talked about agriculture. Now forestry. When you see Google Maps itself on day 1 and day 2, you can understand some amount of change is there. And this change detection algorithms, right, on satellite images have a very big application in all of these sectors. So on forestry, there are people who are monitoring forest fires. There are people who are monitoring deforestation every day. There are people who are monitoring what types of forests are there, what is the forest health, do I have to do anything to maintain the forest, right? The forestry ministry. And there are institutes of forest studies also, right? So all of those are also, think about it as you are launching some satellite and you are providing these applications. Who might be the customers for it? So agriculture, may I have told you that there are farmers and there are companies that are giving farmers loans and also insurance. So this is a very big market for loans and insurance of farms. And in the forestry, I told you there are institutions and government ministries and also private players who are looking at forests as a resource, right? And in oil and gas also, people try to look at the resources that they have underneath the sea and also underneath the land, and they want to monitor the pipelines. And all of these are very, very big use cases, because these are companies with huge amounts of budgets and they want to look at that particular place every day, right? So if you are having such a business use case or satellite data which can cater to that uh, application, then you obviously have a lot of profit, right? And then there is alternative energy like windmills and solar panels. You can provide optimum amount of positions where these windmills can be installed on hills based on the winds or wind patterns and also the height of the hills. And also, if you talk about solar panels, you have to see the solar shade or the digital elevation model around you, and all of that are deliverables or derivables from satellite imagery, right? So in the first four applicants itself, there's like huge market, minimum $200 million of market is there in the first four applications itself. Coming to minerals and mining, also here also there's constant volumetric analysis that is done. Mining scouting is done, mineral scouting is done by governments and also private entities, because private entities take into contracts all of these lands for mining. So there's business there as well, and utilities like electricity monitoring, right? And where the optimum towers can be placed, that is there. Fisheries, may you have where the fish is located, you can give that insights to fisherman. You can also count the water. So in there is two types of fisheries: inland fisheries and also sea-based seafood, right? So in inland fisheries, what happens is they take let's say a water or a pond or a lake for a rent, or they own it, and then they fish inside that. They put seeds, and also you can monitor that. You can monitor what amount of budget you need to get the optimum amount of fish output, right? So that is there. In construction also, real estate monitoring, optimum placement of buildings, civil engineering applications are there. In transportation, road placement, urban planning, all those applications are there. Maritime, may you have ship detection. You have when you detect a ship, right, there's two possibilities to it. Either you are detecting based for commercial ships or defense ships also, right? So there's two applications for it as well. And disaster, you have insurance, finance, I already talked about. Not just agriculture, but also you have home insurance also. You can monitor the assets for the banks, right? And then you have communications. As I told, communication satellites have their own use cases for defense, for TV, radio, and all of those things. News and media. So in the when Russia and Ukraine war is happening, you might have seen on social media that there's a lot of satellite images that are used when a war is happening, right? And satellite images are the primary source of signal intelligence or image intelligence for any army or a government to take action, right? For example, if a village is underutilized or under resourced, if the input comes to an administration, the first thing they look is at a satellite image to have a holistic view of what is going wrong with that village. Same is the case with the defense sector as well. If something is going wrong or some insight is coming from satellite image, like the troop movement is there and that is being seen by the satellites, then they take action based on that. So you are able to see news like there is a lot of troop movement inside Russia to the borders. How do they see it? Although some amount of manual intelligence is also there from the villages near the border, but most of it is from the satellite intelligence only, right? So we have real estate management, retail and geo marketing. We have travel, tourism, and leisure as well. So in tourism also, you need to plan the least bothering way for the tourists and how they can approach a particular A to B place, right? For all of that, digital elevation models are used. They are derived out of satellite imagery. Local and regional planners, emergency services. We have education, training, and research. For that also, satellites are there. Education satellite like EduSat. As I told, security, defense, and ministry. Environment, we know pollution, how much pollution is there. This has also become a biggest use case, biggest business opportunity, because UN has given SDGs, right, to each country. And each country has given a certain mandate to every company that they should not, cross this carbon footprint, right? And the companies have to prove that their carbon footprint is not crossing this level, right? And how do they do that? Basically, they prove that using certain sensors that are installed in their perimeter and also using satellite imagery, right? So all of these are applications in which you can sell your analysis, your data, your expertise, your technology, your infrastructure to the customers. And I have spent maximum amount of time in this because this is the biggest use case currently existing for private players to enter into, and it has the least barrier for people to enter into. Because if you want to start doing any of this application, right, all you need to do is get one satellite image of an area. Let's talk about agriculture. So you assume that you have a farm to monitor. You go on to our site, ISRO site called Bunidi, or you go on, if it is a foreign data, you go on to their respective site You download the satellite image of that data, which is, by the way, free. Most of the satellite data is available as free, not the very high resolution ones, but most of satellite data which can cater to these applications is free. So ISRO site is Bonidhi. You can come over to that site, you can download the data, and you can do the analysis, and the type of analysis and the method to do this analysis is also in open source. This requires certain amount of domain knowledge, but getting it is really easy because you all are engineers, right? You can really understand what is happening inside the payload, what is the radiance, and how to analyze that. So once you go through that topic, it will be really easy to understand, right? So you download it, you analyze it, you provide an output. So once you get a one farm, download the image, process the image, analyze the image, you get the output, which part of the farm is not healthy, which part of the farm is healthy, right? You get a heat map, and you can sell that piece of analytics to a company, right, which is providing insurance or which is providing, let's say, loans to farmers. So this is a simple application, and I told, and in this way there are applications for all these customers that are there in this sector, right? So you can assume, so one amount of ways you can charge based on the area of analytics that you are doing, right? So probably you are doing 1 kilometer or 1 kilometer analysis, and you can charge, let's say, 25,000 or 30,000 for one time, right? So what is the cost that you are investing in it? Probably nothing, because you already have a laptop, the data is free. All that you need to do is understand it and get the knowledge and invest your time in it. And both of these are some things that are really necessary for anyone to get into any business, right? So both of these are really really important, because you have to have the interest and the curiosity to understand what is happening. If you have both of these, all of the business that are existing in these applications, you can do it. And there are companies that have started from zero and crossed these barriers and are right now earning millions of dollars, right? So this is the major sector of this webinar, and if you have understood that, understanding the rest of the webinar is really easy. So I want to take you through a quantitative analysis of the market, right? So currently the Earth observation market is 2.8 billion euros, right? So it is, you can understand what is billion, right? So it is 10 power 6 into 10 power 3, that is 9 zeros, and it is euros, right? So this big the market of the Earth observation itself is. And total space-based services, so communication, satellite launching, satellite manufacturing, launch vehicle manufacturing, propulsion, telescopes, all of them combined, by 2040 this figure will cross 350 billion dollars. And especially in India, ISRO has monopoly, and there is literally no private companies that are doing it on a larger scale. There are startups that have started 2 years or 1.5 year, or 2.5 years back, but they have not touched this scale till now, like SpaceX has does, or Orbital Insight has does, right? So there is very big opportunity in India to get the share of most of this amount that we India will be doing the business in 2000 till 2040, right? So the breakup of this 2.8 billion euros currently, as I showed you, is, you can see agriculture, we have the maximum, climate services, energy, and urban development. So all of these are big government sectors, and insurance and finance sectors, like that, right? And segment market share between 2001 and 2031 also, you are able to see from this market research report that insurance and finance is growing very faster, right? So this is a graph, and on this graph you're able to see the market share in 2021 on x-axis and 2031 in y-axis, right? And this line is y is equals to x, right? Which means that it will be almost same in 2031 also. The market share will be almost same, right? So almost all sectors are lying on the line, but insurance and finance is predicted right now, it is around 5%, but it is predicted to grow at 21%. So this is a very big opportunity, at least for Indian players, because Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana is supported by government itself. So almost all farmers can get insurance, and if you are in this space, there's a very good opportunity that you will be earning a lot of money if you are solving that particular problem, right? And the same is shown in this figure as well. So you are able to see the agriculture, or related to agriculture, insurance and finance services are doing a lot of business even now and later as well, 2027 as well. And in the left side graph, what you're able to see is the data selling and value added services. So for example, you may think that I cannot launch a satellite, right? So how can I do analytics? So in the left report, what you're able to see, is EO data selling is a smaller market than a value-added services. So there are people who are launching satellites and selling the data, and the revenue for that is smaller than people who are doing analytics on that data. So you buy the data or you get the free data and you do analysis and you sell it. That is having a larger revenue even now or in 2027 also, rather than selling your data as well. So you may not think, probably you may think to launch a satellite, that is well and good. But if you think that, okay, I will just do the analytics and sell that analytics using my skills, then that is having a bigger opportunity even now and also in the future. So I'll just give a brief of who are the existing players in foreign and also in the national markets. So this is the foreign market players, the biggest players. There are n number of players, but I want to talk about, there are 6 sectors in it. I want to talk about these players. So planet.com is a company which launches nanosats, right? Nanosats, you already probably know, are satellites which you can hold in your hand also. And this planet.com has launched more than 250 satellites, nanosats. 80 of them were launched from ISRO's PSLV only. And these provide daily images of any place on Earth, probably daily 2 times also sometimes they provide, right? So they sell this data to every country literally, and they earn lots of money. They are already listed on NASDAQ, and their value is day by day growing because they are venturing into different areas of imaging as well. Initially, they used to do 4-band imaging. Now they are doing 8-band imaging. They are also getting into radar imaging. So you see that there's a market and they are trying to grow, right? So there is clearly opportunity inside this market. SpaceX, you already know, Elon Musk company makes launch vehicles and also broadband satellites, right? So there is again different market here. Earth observation is over, then launch vehicles and internet providing satellites. Now Amazon has also got into that market. Geo also wants to get into that market. Airtel has already gone into that market. Providing broadband satellites, it's not a big satellite, it's small satellites rotating around you, always giving you internet, right? That is the new technology. The other thing is Orbital Insight, which is a pure analytics company, right? They buy the data, do analytics, sell it. So this is the business model that I was talking about. Virgin Galactic, space tourism and launch vehicles. They do launch vehicles and also make a very good space shuttle which takes people into space. That's one more business opportunity. Blue Origin is again like SpaceX, provides space tourism and launch vehicles from Amazon. Inmarsat is an interesting company which only launches communication satellites. So they sell the bandwidth on these communication satellites to all the other players. So even India also has some contract with Inmarsat where we take certain bandwidth to talk from Antarctica to Indian ground stations on of ISRO. So these are some major sectors where foreign players are playing. These are Indian existing players. So we have Pixel, which launches hyperspectral satellites, Dhruva Space, which does satellite manufacturing and data reception. Satsure is a big company now. They are doing Earth data analytics. Same thing. What I told you. They work with HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank to give insights of farms and their insurances. Skyroot Aerospace makes launch vehicles. Agnikul Cosmos again makes launch vehicles. 3D printed engine they have made very recently. And there are very big players like Godrej, Tata Advanced Systems, and the other companies which are manufacturing partners with ISRO, right? So ISRO's rocket has many components in it, and even satellites also, and all of them are not made by ISRO, right? So we buy a lot of components and also source a lot of components from the private players, right? And that is also a very big opportunity because one rocket launch costs 400 crores, and most of this 400 crores is like parts which we buy from private players, right? There are subsystems, there are trackers, there are radars, there are gyroscopes. All of them are not essentially made at ISRO. All of them are technologies that we buy from private players and then assemble it, because once we make the technology, we give it to private players to manufacture it. So as you know that already we have a lot of companies in this space. What is Indian government doing for the ecosystem? So ISRO had monopoly till now, but the time has changed. So till let's say 2-3 years back, ISRO had the only right to launch satellites, launch vehicles, do anything in space, right? They, according to law, policy itself was not there to support private players. But the time has changed. There is upcoming space activities bill, space RS data policy, spacecom policy, geospatial data policy. All of them talk about rapid and revolutionary liberalization of the policies space policies, right? So geospatial data policy has already come. It's a guidelines, right? So these say that till 2-3 years back, it was impossible for private players to launch, to give satellite images for free, right? So Google Maps may whatever you're able to see, an Indian company could not do that because law was not enabling them to do that. But right now, anyone can capture, and that also only Indian companies can capture the data and can sell it. So for example, you go to Google Maps and you open New York, right? There's a 3D map of New York. You're able to see buildings. In Australia, you were able to see Melbourne cricket ground, all of that in 3D. But in India, it has not happened because Google had no permission to do that, and no private company had also permission to do that. But when these guidelines were released, every company like MapMyIndia started doing 3D maps. Scient, a big company, software company, started doing 3D maps. And now a policy came from government that we want to 3D maps for all these villages and cities. Private companies can put contracts and they can get the work from us, right? So such amount of liberalization has started. There was a center of centers like InSpace, NSL, and DISPA established. So InSpace is a organization which can give rules and regulations, permissions for private companies to do these activities, and also guidance. NSIL is a PSU, which is like if you want some work from ISRO, then they will take that work and then they'll give it the work to ISRO and you can get the output from NSIL. ISPA is an Indian Space Association. A lot of private companies come under an umbrella to talk to government regarding this. So that is ISPA. So there is good amount of revolutionary activities in private sector that is happening in space. So ISRO has already been encouraging private players to manufacture launch vehicles, happening in the form of Skyroot Aerospace, Agnikul Cosmos, and other players as well. It has been supporting satellite launches, right? A lot of student satellites have been launched. One Pixel recently launched a satellite. And then there is satellite data through Bunidhi that is free for everyone. Lot of data is free. So if someone wants to do analytics, right, this is a portal where they can come to and download Indian satellite data and then they can use in their own business, right? So once you get all of this digested, right, there's another sector, right, then who are very interested in Indian space ecosystem. Because if I want to start a launch vehicle business, it will be very hard for me, but I have the knowledge, I have the technology, I have the network, right? If I do a launch vehicle business, probably I'll be successful, right? So where do I get the money from? Obviously, you go to a venture capital and you pitch your business idea, right? So if you have a proof that you have a good technology and you have your network and you can convert your customers to your leads to customers for launch vehicles, then you obviously have a lot of support because many VCs are active in India with respect to space domain. Pixel got more than 50 million funding, even though it is in India, because they are having the proof and they're having the customers for it. So they obviously have the funding, right? And one of the important thing is human resource cost is very minimal in India compared to other players like planet.com, right? So if they want to hire one developer, right, they have to pay a lot of cost, right? But here you can probably do that amount of work with like one third of the cost, right? And that's why you can price your commodities very low, because the satellite imagery are a global commodity, right? And when we put our price to a one third of a price, obviously the whole market will look up to us, and that's what Pixel and other companies are doing as well, right? And there are another sectors that I have not talked about, like debris, space debris, object tracking, propulsion systems, and then there's inertial systems that are garnering more interest because these are subsystems and that can be used worldwide. So you might not think about launching a launch vehicle, but you might think about manufacturing a part of a launch vehicle which will be used by other launch vehicles, right? That's one thing. So I hope I have touched most of the opportunities in space. And obviously, you guys might be thinking, okay, how do we get into space activities? So obviously, one thing will be that you have to fix up your goal and start somewhere, right? You have to start in any particular topic, and once you grab hold of a topic, then you obviously will get into deeper and deeper knowledge areas, and then you will meet a lot of interesting people who may probably collaborate with you. So some of the topics I've listed here, like signal processing, image processing, workflows. Like if you're a pure CSE guy and you want to just work on processing algorithms, right, you can do workflow orchestration in the analytics sphere. and then you have orbit attitude filtering, you have subsystems manufacturing that I talked about right now, you have thermal control, space vehicle design, fluid dynamics, right? And then you have launch vehicle in a whole, right? So all of these are topics that you can just pick up, and then you can dwell into deeper areas so that you can understand what are the applications and who the customers might be if you sort of start a business in that area, right? So I think I have touched most of the application, and if you have any more doubts or any queries, or if you want to meet interesting people that you probably might know, so you can connect to me on LinkedIn. That is my URL and that's the QR code. If I am not able to help you, I will connect you to someone who will be able to help you. And if you have any questions, you can ask me right now, or probably mail me. That's my mail ID, and I will respond to every question that you guys pose. Thank you. Are you guys there?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I'm Kritika, one of the student coordinators in EDC Cell from IT Department second year. I would like to thank our chief guest who honored this event by his innovative and amusing thoughts. And I would like to thank our beloved principal, staff members, and the student coordinators who are the folks and the reason for this actually big happening and making this event a grand success. And last but not the least, I would like to thank and appreciate the presence of all the participants who showed up interest and shared your insight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We can wind up the webinar. Thank you so much.